morning from our global headquarters in New York. I'm Vonnie Quinn. Danny Berger is on assignment. Welcome to Bloomberg Brief. Let's set your agenda. Travel chaos. London's Heathrow Airport shuts down after a nearby fire knocked out power. Thousands of passengers stranded. Critical mineral expansion. President Trump invokes emergency powers to boost production in the United States and reduce reliance on foreign imports. Europe's defence push falters. Leaders fail to agree on delivering €5 billion to secure ammunition for Ukraine. We speak to the Lithuanian President on how to drive the process forward. So let's take a look at where we stand markets-wise. Futures have turned negative now. Remember, the S&P finished down about 0.2% yesterday, bringing its year-to-date loss back to 7.8%, peak to trough from February 19th. If we turn things around, we could see the first weekly gain in 4 weeks, but as of right now, that does not look like it's going to happen. Nasdaq 100 futures down 0.4%. The Nasdaq 100 was down 0.3% yesterday. That peak to trough loss still 11.25%. Russell 2000 futures also down 0.75%. Don't forget, we're looking at significantly higher trading volume likely today thanks to triple witching, $4.5 trillion of options expiring. That may have an impact later in the afternoon. As for bonds, we are seeing those declines hold for yields, with the 10-year still at 422.52 and the 2-year at 394.38 after the Fed meeting on Wednesday sent those yields down about 10 basis points. We're also keeping an eye on Nike. It's dropping after the sportswear retailer's turnaround effort faces new hurdles as the company attempts to clear out old inventory during the growing trade war. Shares there down more than 5% pre-market. Shares of FedEx, meanwhile, also down almost 7% now as it lowers its full-year guidance for the third consecutive quarter due to what it calls inflation and uncertain demand for shipments. And Micron also falling despite a strong sales forecast for the current quarter, bolstered by demand for AI products. Its chips for phones and PCs have been weaker, but it's been showing signs of recovery. Don't forget, there are 4.5 hours to go to market open, so this could all turn around. And coming up this hour, Kallum Pickering of Peel Hunt and the CFO of Mercado Libre. Well, one of the world's busiest airports closed by a fire right now. Heathrow Airport in London is expected to be shut all day after a power outage nearby caused an electrical fire, affecting hundreds of thousands of travellers. Bloomberg's Alex Morgan joins us from Heathrow. So, Alex, set the scene. This substation wasn't actually at the airport, but it was close by and has shut down everything?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it, really? Here at Heathrow, at peak times, on average, 40 aircraft are taking off an hour. You can see now, not a thing, not a peep. The skies are completely clear. The airport is silent. This is unprecedented. The airport has seen the disruption today to around 1,300 flights. Now, this is because of a fire at a power substation that caused an outage at Heathrow. While that fire is now under control, the airport's saying there's no time frame for when the power will be reliably restored. So there is a closure until at least midnight UK tonight. Now, of course, this had an impact for the aircraft already in the air on the way to Heathrow, around 120 flights, particularly affecting Middle Eastern carriers on the way in overnight. But now, of course, this is a major transatlantic route, of course. So now the US carriers are going to be thinking about what they're going to do with their flights. It's going to have a knock-on throughout today and then, of course, across the weekend as the airlines have got their aircraft and their people in the wrong places. We are looking at days of disruption. But Heathrow, I can tell you, definitely closed until midnight UK tonight. That's what we're hearing from the airport this morning.
And what is happening with the rest of the transportation infrastructure? Passengers have been diverted to other countries, in fact, France, Ireland among them. How are they getting to their destinations?
I mean, this is the question, really, and it's a huge logistical challenge. When I used that word unprecedented earlier, I didn't use it lightly. I was talking to some of our colleagues on Bloomberg Global Aviation, sort of saying a shutdown of a major airport, according to our data, the 4th busiest in the world last year. You know, asking them, what's the word you would use? They would say unprecedented. It is extraordinary for the airport to be taken offline for the whole day. Now, we're seeing some flights diverted into other airports. There's Gatwick Airport here in London. That's taking in some flights. We know some carriers have also diverted to airports in Europe. But the question, as you're saying there, is what next? What for all those people and plans that are coming up in the coming days? At the moment, I think it's fair to say the airlines are trying to answer those questions. Some people are praising the communications they're getting. Other people are frustrated on social media about not knowing what is happening. But this really is unprecedented disruption. People are encouraged to check with the airline they're traveling with, and if they're in the UK, to absolutely not come to Heathrow today.
Pretty phenomenal to see a place that sees 200,000 people going through it brought to its knees. Alex Morgan reporting there from Heathrow Airport. Thank you. Central bankers feeling stranded these days too. The BOE, BOJ and Federal Reserve all expressing uncertainty about their economies due to tariffs. It's all having an impact on their policy making, of course. Joining us now is Kallum Pickering, Chief Economist at Peel Hunt. Kallum, we're arguably seeing more movement in gilts and in European bond yields today after all of the decisions this week. Talk to us about the interpretation the bond market is making following the three major central banks and their decisions this week.
Well, I mean, as market analysts, we always like to say a central bank's hawkish, are they dovish? I think for most central banks at the moment, they're decidedly neutral, which is simply to say we really don't know what happens next. And on the one hand, you say, well, if tariffs really knock confidence and we see weakness in consumer and producer demand, it's possible that we see some one-off effects of tariffs, but then actually a period of disinflation. So as a central banker, I'd actually be inclined to lean towards the weakness and ease. However, we've just gone through a very bitter period of inflation where essentially an external supply shock, in 2022, of course, it was gas, produced not just a one-off effect, which central banks initially had anticipated. Remember, this transitory word is now reappearing, but actually this persistent effect. So I actually think they just have to hold pat and just wait to see what the effects are.
Yeah, we're seeing quite an amount of movement in gilts. Money markets in Britain pricing in about 60 basis points of cuts by year end. That's up from 51, but back down again today, it would seem. So is there a little bit of uncertainty in the bond market as well?
Without question. And if I think about my own calls for the Fed and the Bank of England this year, I roughly agree with money markets. I think we'll probably get 50 basis points from the Bank of England. I think they'll probably cut in May, and I think they'll cut in August. From the Fed, I think we'll get 2 cuts, probably in Q2 and Q3. But that's really the average of, with some fairly extreme potential outliers either side. And also, I think I would just keep in mind here that if we get to 4% in the UK and the US, that's still considered tight monetary policy. We're just removing some of the tightness if we stop at 4. I mean, the UK is a slow growth economy. If we get normal inflation and normal growth, probably a neutral rate is closer to maybe 3.25, 3.5. At the Fed, it might be a little bit higher. And so even markets, as they anticipate a little bit of cutting, they're still signaling that actually monetary policy needs to be tight.
The US is looking at stagflation, staring it straight in the face, it would seem, even according to the Federal Reserve chair. What is the situation if it comes to that? If we do see slowing growth and unemployment ticking higher, but then there's this persistent inflation, which may see a transitory bump from any tariff policy, but there is still other inflation there as well in the system.
Well, I think we need to be a little bit careful. Stagflation is, for me, something that is very serious and often overused. We mustn't exaggerate. A period of slow economic growth in the US, remember, we've just had a period of above trend economic growth for over 2 years. 3% growth is not the sustainable rate in the US, probably closer to, say, 1.8, 1.9 according to the Fed. So if we were to just undershoot just a normal business cycle slowdown to, say, 1.5, 2% for a while with a bit of inflation, and if the so-called DOGE creates a bit of unemployment, I don't think that's stagflation. Stagflation is rising unemployment, no growth, and rising inflation that leaves central banks in a bind. I don't think we're there yet. It's a risk, but it's certainly not a base case.
Kallum, the push to unhook from deficit locks in Europe, does it create a two-tier Europe once again, and how long before that happens?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think we should just focus principally on the positives for now. I mean, Germany is an economy with essentially 2 problems. One, this deindustrialization that we've seen since 2018. We've had about a 20% fall in overall industrial output. That's because of gas prices, it's because of competition from China, it's because of a gradual loss of competition against all global producers, Germany also relies much too much on global trade. It's an economy that's designed for a period that no longer exists. That is when trade liberalization is vogue and we're able to get the supply that we need and get the energy we need and sell to who we want. And so it's necessary for Germany to rebalance towards domestic consumption. So I actually think for the next few years, what we're going to see is just better growth out of Germany. And with any luck, actually, this additional demand for the big economy in the Eurozone should prime the pump for a little bit more activity in some of those weaker economies. I think France is going to benefit. Italy might even benefit too. But 2-3 years down the line, we may run into some problems.
All right, well, let's get through 2025 first. Kallum, thank you so much for joining us. That is Kallum Pickering of Peel Hunt. Now, two other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. Sources say UBS is examining the potential relocation of its headquarters if Switzerland requires the bank to hold an extra $25 billion worth of capital. The bank is stepping up lobbying efforts as the proposal begins its passage through the Swiss Parliament, with a draft due to go before lawmakers in May. The Turkish lira is experiencing its largest weekly drop in nearly 2 years. The currency's decline began after the detention of the Istanbul mayor and was followed by a shock interest rate hike by the central bank. The interest rate hike aims to contain outflows from lira deposits and prevent a weaker lira from stoking inflation. And Elon Musk held an all-hands meeting with Tesla employees. He tried to reassure them that they should hang on to their stock despite what he called rocky moments and negative news. Musk addressed the company's challenges, including vandalism and political backlash. Meanwhile, shares in Tesla have plunged more than 40% so far this year, giving up gains from the stock surge that followed President Trump's inauguration. Coming up, European leaders failed to agree to a package to support Ukraine. We speak to the Lithuanian President about those efforts next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York. Europe's defence push for Ukraine has faltered. France and Italy have held up efforts to deliver €5 billion to secure ammunition for Ukraine this year. Ukraine's president says his country urgently needs weapons now. Let's go to Bloomberg's Oliver Cook in Brussels, who has an interview for us on all of this. Ollie.
That's right, Vani. Thank you so much. We've just sort of wrapped up that leaders meeting late last night, and we're here to be speaking with the Lithuanian President, Gitanas Nauseda. Thank you so much for joining us after these important talks that we've had here in Brussels over the last 24 hours. I'd like to begin, if we might, just on your reaction to what we saw earlier in this week in the conversation between President Trump and President Putin. Do you feel that this is sort of sincere and real progress towards a ceasefire? How do you interpret what we got from the two presidents?
I have no doubts that President Donald Trump is really has very frank intention to achieve the peace, to achieve the ceasefire. The same I should say about the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskiy. But when it comes to Russia, I don't see this frank intention to achieve the consensus or to proceed with the negotiations. And so far, Russia is imitating the negotiations, talking about possible peace and about possible ceasefire, but they are not even ready to keep the ceasefire as promised, not to attack, not to strike the critical infrastructure of Ukraine. After the Putin promise to President Trump that he will stop the activities against the critical infrastructure, actually they were continuing these operations. It is the information provided by Ukraine, and of course it shows that the willingness of Russian Federation to get the result is very limited.
And in terms of, this is something that I'm sure took a lot of space in the conversations you had yesterday, how Europe basically gets a seat at the table. Are you concerned that basically the bilateral discussions between Trump and Putin effectively formalize Europe being sidelined? How does Europe get its seat at the table? What can it offer in these negotiations?
Europe can play a very important role, not by discussing, but by taking the decisions. And we are taking decisions. We have very clear position on strengthening the pressure on Russia. We were talking about the sanctions, 17 package of sanctions for Russia. We were talking about further and even larger military support to Ukraine. And I think those actions are most effective if we really want to proceed and to have these negotiations through strength. Because the position of Europe is we have to bring Putin to the table of negotiations through strength.
And I think one of the concerns that we had from this meeting over the last 24 hours is in terms of concrete deliverables. There was, yes, the verbal support for Ukraine, but there was a failure to get to this $5 billion euro ammunition package. Is the sort of EU, has it reached its limit in terms of concrete short-term steps that they can deliver? And do we now need to look at that coalition of the willing spearheaded by Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer in order to get these deliveries to Ukraine?
I think we should wait until the meeting which will take place next week. And it's very important to have these, as you say, deliverables according to the plan led by United Kingdom and France. We are talking about possible presence, European military presence, after the ceasefire, after the peace negotiations. And my country is ready to provide the necessary support, and we are talking about very concrete numbers of our military troops, but there should be commitment of all countries participating in this coalition to provide this support. So I think the discussions will be done, but I would like to underline that Europe will play a larger role, but for that we need decisions.
And can I ask what that number is, what you're willing to commit?
We are so far in the discussions, and probably it would be too premature to mention very concrete figures. I will be ready to deliver these figures during our meetings.
And then there's also been a lot of discussion about basically the United States' willingness to defend all of its NATO allies. I understand your defense minister has recently come back from the United States. Do you have the reassurances from the U.S. administration that that is a secure proposal?
At this moment, I would say we have very positive signals that the focus of United States on eastern flank of NATO will remain strong. This is very important because, in my view, it's the best factor of deterrence. If United States will keep the presence in the eastern flank, it would deter Russia from some aggressive actions in the future. And we are ready to host even more American soldiers. We have needed infrastructure. We are ready to provide all the necessary support to them. This is a matter of political decision, and I hope very much, and I look forward that this decision will be done.
And there has been a discussion as well as expanding France's nuclear capabilities, deterrence of the nuclear umbrella. Would you be willing, would you be open, would you welcome hosting French nuclear arms within Lithuania?
Those are two separate questions. First of all, yes, umbrella itself, and deployment of nuclear equipment in the country. So far, we didn't start the discussion regarding the deployment of any nuclear weapons on the territory of Lithuania. But we are willing, and we will be willing, to discuss the possibility to use this possibility, this nuclear shield provided, or at least idea of nuclear shield for eastern flank countries, including my country. So President Macron expressed a very interesting idea. So far, we have many questions and we need answers, algorithms, how it will look like. And I think the President Macron expressed the view that probably there is a need to send experts and to discuss it at the experts level.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, the president of Lithuania, Gitanas Nauseda, speaking to us just after that EU leaders meeting that's been held here in Brussels, and of course, as Ukraine's future hangs in the balance with negotiations sort of convening next week in Saudi Arabia.
An important conversation, and thanks for bringing that to us, Ollie. That is Bloomberg's Oliver Crook. This is Bloomberg. Time now for our front page news. First up, the FT leading with Accenture warning investors that it is already feeling the squeeze from efforts to rein in spending on federal contractors. It's one of 10 consulting firms targeted by the Trump administration in the crackdown orchestrated by Elon Musk's DOGE team. The company didn't cut its full-year earnings guidance, but did admit that the new trends in the business were, quote, very recent. Next up, Bloomberg leading with President Trump invoking emergency powers to boost the ability of the U.S. to produce critical minerals. The move is a response to concerns that China controls the processing, which is used in products such as batteries and defense systems. The administration says the U.S. is import reliant on at least 15 critical minerals and that 70% of imports of rare earths come from China. And the New York Times is reporting Elon Musk would be briefed about the U.S. military's contingency planning for any potential war with China. President Trump denied the report, saying it was, quote, ridiculous and, quote, completely untrue. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed that Musk would visit the Pentagon, but characterized the meeting as an informal discussion. A check on markets now. We are looking for futures to go green in order to have the first up week in 4, but so far that is not the case. They are lower. The 10-year yield where it was at yesterday at 4.2194. From our global headquarters in New York, welcome to Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn. Let's set your agenda. Travel chaos. London's Heathrow Airport shuts down after a nearby fire knocked out power. Thousands of passengers are stranded. Critical mineral expansion. President Trump invokes emergency powers to boost production in the U.S. and reduce reliance on foreign imports. Latin America e-commerce giant Mercado Libre doubles down on growth. We're going to be speaking to the CFO on how the company is disrupting the region's financial services industry. Let's first get a check on markets on Triple Witching Day, would you believe? Futures, which had been pointed a little higher, now lower, firmly in the red. S&P futures down 0.4% after the index dropped fractionally 0.2% yesterday. Nasdaq 100 futures down almost 0.5% now, and Russell 2000 futures leading the losses down 0.6%. There are, however, 4 hours to go, so we'll see if this can turn around. We are, I guess, hoping to eke out the first gain in 4 for the S&P 500. That's 4 weeks of losses if we don't indicate a gain in today's session. Yields around about where they were yesterday. Not much movement, if anything, to the downside. 421.94 on the 10-year, and we're still at 394.17 on the 2-year. So just a little bit of risk aversion in the last half hour. One of the world's busiest airports has been closed by a nearby fire. Heathrow Airport in London expected to be shut all day after a power outage at a nearby substation caused an electrical fire, and it's affecting hundreds of thousands of travellers. Bloomberg's Alex Morgan joins us now from Heathrow. Typically a very, very bustling airport. It should be open at least 3 hours now, and it's dead. Alex, what's happening?
Well, Vonnie, good morning and welcome to the world's 4th most active airport. Today, probably the quietest. This is unprecedented disruption. I mean, for Heathrow, we're looking back decades, really, to see anything like this. And in fact, analysts are saying we haven't seen it before. We're talking about disruption to hundreds of thousands of passengers, as you were saying there. But just to give you an idea, this is home to British Airways. For that airline alone, more than 600 flights affected. Virgin Atlantic as well, more than 60 flights for them. Now, those are the airlines, sort of like, for whom this is their main hub base. But of course, Heathrow is a major centre for transatlantic travel, but of course, as well to connect to the Middle East. We know that when the airport was closed because of this fire at a power substation, there were around 120 flights inbound to the airport. They had to turn around. Many diverted, some sent back, some to Europe and others to other airports in the UK. Now, the power's still off. The fire, the local authorities are saying, is under control. The situation there is under control. Now the investigation begins, but it's knocked out the busiest airport in Europe. We know that's going to take place until at least midnight local time here in the UK. But then, Vonnie, the disruption, it goes on for days. You know, you've got the many Ps they're looking at. Planes, the planes are in the wrong places. The people, they're people in the wrong places. And passengers are stranded all over the globe. We're looking at days of disruption, even when they do manage to get a reliable flow of power back into the airport behind me.
It does seem odd that one substation can cause this whole airport and 200,000 passengers to be displaced and really not going anywhere. Some, as you say, in other countries trying to get to a destination. What happens next to these passengers? Will Heathrow be able to accommodate some of them even tomorrow, Sunday, Monday?
Well, I mean, yeah, this is the question. You're mentioning there, 200,000 people. That's roughly the number of passengers coming through. At peak times here at Heathrow, we're getting 40 aircraft taking off. As you can see, it's really eerily quiet. Like I say, growing up around here, you know, to see the skies completely clear, it is really off-putting. So we know that Gatwick has taken in many of the flights that were coming into Heathrow. Other airports in Europe have taken some in. But, Vonnie, I mean, what we're seeing on social media, particularly if you look at travellers, many people just frustrated, wanting to know when they're going to be able to get the next flight. People arriving today, having not checked the news, getting to the airport and thinking, what am I going to do? The advice to travellers, by the way, for everybody is to check with their airlines, whether they are flying out of Heathrow or into Heathrow, or indeed just to check in general, because this will have, I feel like, a domino series of disruption. One flight missed will affect the next, will affect the next. The airlines, of course, are trying to communicate through their social channels and their websites, but people here being told, don't come to Heathrow, certainly not today, but looking into the weekend as well to check for the latest updates.
And it remains to be seen where the liability will lie. That will all come in the days and weeks to come. Alex Morgan, thank you so much. Alex reporting there from Heathrow. President Donald Trump is invoking his emergency powers to boost the ability of the United States to produce critical minerals and potentially coal. Let's go straight to Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw now for more details. So, Kevin, another executive order signed in the Oval Office. What consequences does this particular EO have for America's minerals output?
You know, I think it's not going to have any immediate consequences, but what it does do is show that President Donald Trump still remains very interested in trying to figure out how to boost American production of these things. And I think this is going to come as part of a broader set of efforts that are going to strip away various environmental protections and other kinds of regulation that may have made this these kinds of operations more difficult or more expensive up to now. And so I think you are looking at the potential for some projects to maybe now sort of move forward or get started, but these are all long-term projects. They all require capital, and they all require companies deciding that they're actually going to be able to get a return on investment. And so it doesn't appear this comes with any particular funding. It doesn't yet seem like there's necessarily the government hand there yet, other than clearing the way regulation-wise for things to move a lot faster. So that could make a difference on the margins, but I think beyond that, it's going to take a little while for us to see anything from them.
And we saw shares of Australia and China miners fall in today's session on this as well. Separately, Trump is denying a New York Times report that Elon Musk would be briefed by the Pentagon on any military contingency planning for any potential war with China. It's quite an extraordinary report. We do have denials, as I say. What do we know exactly about the details of the sourcing and what this report is saying?
Yeah, I do think we're still trying to sort out exactly what had been planned, and obviously the report then changed. It seems to have changed what was going to happen, but it does appear that, according to these reports, that Musk was going to get some kind of a briefing. I think the real question is just how sensitive it was, what the security clearance level of this was. But obviously, this kind of planning, the kind of contingency planning that the Pentagon does, particularly with regards to China and potential conflict, is some of the most sensitive kinds of information in the U.S. government. And so there has been real questions about what kind of, security clearance process has ever really been done for Elon Musk in this. Obviously, he had some clearances related to his previous work as a contractor, but that's often a different level than some of the kinds of things you're talking about when it comes to military operational planning. I think more broadly, it continues to sort of get at this question where people don't really know what Elon Musk has access to or doesn't, what kind of accountability there is, what he's doing with that information. Remember, he's now, he runs several companies, he owns all these big businesses, and access to secret information like this actually becomes a bit of a competitive advantage from a business standpoint, and a lot of companies that he's competing against don't have that.
Kevin, just to move to a different theater, Ukraine, Russia right now, I think it's fair to say we're hitting some snags on this ceasefire on energy assets. What do we know about this deal that was agreed to, and whether anyone really believes that there is a deal in place if these energy assets continue to get hit? We're seeing that transit pipeline get hit most recently.
Well, I mean, look, I think all along you've had European leaders, you've had Ukrainian President Zelenskyy saying there has been no signal at all that Russia is remotely serious about this peace process. And so up to now, it does appear to be a situation where Vladimir Putin has told Trump a couple of the things he wants to hear, but enough of the caveats that make it clear nothing's actually really changing yet. So at some point, I think it's going to be up to Trump to decide whether he sees what's going on, whether he believes that Putin is indeed pursuing peace or is engaged in this process in a serious way. There have been moments where Trump has threatened Russia with more consequences if it doesn't get serious, and so at some point we may have to see what actually happens there. But on the flip side, Trump's relationship with Zelenskyy remains extremely fraught, and increasingly transactional, as you have the president talking about, obviously not just some kind of a deal for Ukraine's mineral wealth, but even conversations now about ownership of a nuclear power plant or other things. So you are getting a sense that there's a question of Trump trying to see what kind of a stake he has in Ukraine's future.
Kevin, thank you so much, as always, for all of the context, setting us up for the day. That is Kevin of Whitelaw there in Brussels. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. Sources say UBS is examining the potential relocation of its headquarters if Switzerland requires the bank to hold an extra $25 billion worth of capital. The bank is stepping up lobbying efforts as the proposal begins its passage through the Swiss parliament, with the draft due to go before lawmakers in May. The Turkish lira is experiencing its largest weekly drop in nearly 2 years. The currency's decline began after the detention of the Istanbul mayor and was followed by a shock interest rate hike by the central bank. The interest rate increase aims to contain outflows from lira deposits and prevent a weaker lira from stoking inflation. And Elon Musk held an all-hands meeting with Tesla employees. He tried to reassure them that they should hang on to their stock despite, quote, rocky moments and negative news. Musk addressed the company's challenges, including vandalism and political backlash. Meanwhile, shares in Tesla have plunged more than 40%, giving up gains from a stock surge that followed President Trump's inauguration. Coming up, Mercado Libre's big bet on Mexico. We're going to be speaking with the CFO of the Latin America e-commerce and payments giant. That's next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Vonnie Quinn in New York. Mercado Libre is doubling down on its growth in Mexico. The Latin America e-commerce and payments giant plans to invest a record $3.4 billion in the country this year. For more on their plans, I'm joined by Bloomberg's Nina Trentman, editor of CFO Briefing, our newsletter devoted to corporate finance and what leaders need to know. And so, Nina, obviously we had results from Mercado Libre. This is a name that analysts go literally gaga for. They love this company and they continue to be surprised by some of the decisions made, but those decisions always seem to pay off.
Yeah, it's an interesting company, dubbed the Amazon of Latin America, has seen strong growth, as you pointed out, in the 19 countries in which it operates. And it's interesting to see that it has both the e-commerce arm as well as a payments arm. And so I think it's basically this virtual cycle or the loop in which they're serving both sides of the business, so to say.
Exactly. Well, let's bring in now Martin de los Santos. He is the CFO of Mercado Libre, and he joins us live from Uruguay. Uruguay. And Martin, thank you so much. So first of all, what are the next steps that you're going to take in order to continue with this massive growth and to surprise analysts once again?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Pleasure being here. Yes, as you know, we operate the largest commerce and fintech platform throughout the region. As Nina mentioned, we operate in 19 different countries and we live in all of those countries. And in terms of investments, we will continue to invest in our logistic infrastructure, which is a critical competitive advantage, as well as investing in our fintech solution. As you know, Latin America is an area of large opportunities. When you look at e-commerce, penetration continues to be relatively low compared to other areas of the world with penetration of 15%. So it's like where the US was maybe 10 years ago. And in terms of fintech, it's even larger, right? When you take the example of Mexico, less than half the population in Mexico have an account, a bank account, less than 15% have a credit card. So we see a large opportunity. And we are taking advantage of that and we are leveraging on that. Last year, we had about 100 million buyers on our e-commerce platform, 61 million monthly active users of our fintech solutions, growing at 34% year on year. So we have experienced very rapid growth. We turned 25 years last year, and we went from being a startup in a garage 25 years ago to becoming the most valuable company in Latin America. But still, when we look ahead, the opportunity continues to be very, very large for us.
Yeah, Martin, you're still growing, of course, at fast rates, similar to a startup. I'm wondering, you talked to us about your investment strategy. You're facing competition from not just Chinese e-commerce chains, but also then from Walmart. So I'm wondering, sort of, how do you know whether you're investing enough in your business?
Yeah, we face a very competitive market, both on commerce and fintech, and we compete leveraging our competitive advantages, which are, as I mentioned, the logistic infrastructure as the fintech infrastructure. And we continue to invest in increasing the penetration of fulfillment. That's an area of investment. And in Mexico, for example, we are north of 70% of fulfillment penetration. That means that 70% of the products that are sold on Mercado Libre are shipped from our own warehouses. But Brazil, we're still at a little bit north of 50%. So we have plenty of more penetration to increase. So we will continue to deploy new fulfillment centers. As an example, last year, we opened 10 fulfillment centers throughout the region. And we plan to continue investing just because the user experience is much better when things are shipped from our own warehouses. We can deliver faster, we can offer more free shipping, and that results in much better conversion. And that's one of the reasons why our GMV, which is a volume transacted on Mercado Libre, has been growing very rapidly. In Q4, we grew roughly at 30% year on year, which is double the rate at which the market is growing. So we continue to gain market share.
How do you balance profits and growth? I know that you have a term for that internally that summarizes that quest that you want to do of delivering both.
This is something, Nina, that we spend a lot of time thinking about and also communicating to the market. We call it grow fit because we operate in a segment that is growing very rapidly and has very large opportunities both on commerce, on fintech, and also on advertising. So we try to balance try to strike the right balance between growth and profitability. We improved significantly our profitability over the past 5 to 6 years, and we continue to deliver very healthy margins. Having said that, the opportunities are so large that we want to make sure that we do capture those opportunities, and we do not shy away from investing behind those opportunities, even if in the short term they might put some margin pressures. So we try to communicate our long-term vision to the market, but like you said, the critical thing is to maintain this growth fit mentality that we have, which is to look for growth, for the long-term growth of the company, while at the same time making sure that we invest wisely and we maintain healthy profit margins.
Martin, a couple of individual challenges, and I wonder how you're approaching them. Brazil is set to increase interest rates, perhaps quite substantially, and Argentina is set to drastically cut spending. How do you think about those macro impacts on your business?
Yeah, over time, we have seen that the trend of people moving online and the digitalization of payments and finance is much stronger force than the actual macro situation. We face many different macro situations throughout the years in Latin America, But obviously, when macro performs well, we do better. But even if macro is a little bit challenging, we'll still, grow because it's much more important what we do in our platform, improving the user experience. The 18,000 developers that we have working on our product are a lot more important than maybe 1 or 2 percentage points of interest rates increasing. But specifically in Brazil, the health of our marketplace and the fintech, our credit book, for instance, is very healthy. I mean, we haven't seen any negative trends yet, but obviously we are very cautious and observing the situation. In Argentina, it's the opposite. In Argentina, we have seen strong recovery on the second half of the year, both on fintech as well as commerce. So we are very optimistic about the macro situation in Argentina so far.
Martin, you're based here in the U.S., domiciled in Delaware and listed on the U.S. stock exchange. Wondering how you're thinking about the return of Donald Trump to the presidency. Is that impacting your business at all or not so much?
Not significantly, Lina. We are listed in the U.S., but all of our operations is in Latin America, except for we have a fulfillment facility in the U.S. where we have American merchants selling into Mexico and Latin America. So we are not necessarily affected by tariffs, for instance. We do not export anything into the U.S. So there's no direct implication in our business. And like I said, I think the most important thing is a trend of people moving online. I will play an important role as leaders on e-commerce on bringing people online. And the same thing with fintech, right? The most important thing is the digitalization of payments, the democratization of fintech products that we're doing in Latin America, a lot more than macro trends or even the measures being taken in the US.
Martin, I'm so curious. One analyst said that you often double down on capital allocation decisions that sparked doubts and triggered sharp sell-offs in the stock, but then ultimately paid off. Who do you model yourself after? Who is your CEO, CFO team whose strategic and capital allocation decisions you admire most?
I think it's hard to put a name. Obviously, we take inspiration of many people and many companies, right, throughout the world. We pay a lot of attention of the trends on commerce, technology in particular. I think the most important thing and the success of Mercado Libre is based on its culture. The fact that we continue to have, even after 25 years, a startup mentality. We continue to think for the long term. We're never satisfied with our own product. We keep on improving it and trying to provide a better user experience. When things don't work out in a region, we build it ourselves. The case of logistics, where 10 years ago, we relied on local carriers. And when we realized that we couldn't give the service that we desired, we built our own fulfillment infrastructure. And today, 98% of products are sent directly from our own fulfillment logistics infrastructure. So I think it's mostly, thinking the long term, being resilient, and making sure that we hire people that share the culture that we have at the company of executing with excellence and so on. So I think I would say culture makes a big difference in our company.
Well, it's certainly paying off for the stock. MELI is the ticker, and it hit an all-time high yesterday, up more than 30% year over year. Our thanks to you, Martin de los Santos of Mercado Libre, and of course Bloomberg's Nina Trentman. And you can subscribe to Nina's CFO briefing newsletter. You should, in fact, at bloomberg.com/newsletters. Let's take a look at what's ahead today, apart from the fact that it's Friday, of course, which is an event in itself. We have New York Fed John Williams speaking at 9 a.m. Eastern, plus cruise company Carnival reporting earnings before the opening bell. And it's Triple Witching Day. About $4.5 trillion worth of options contracts are set to expire. Let's have a quick look at some movers. Nike dropping in the pre-market as the sportswear retailer gives a subdued outlook. We have FedEx sinking as well after it cut its full-year guidance again. And Micron falling despite a strong sales forecast for the current quarter, bolstered by demand for AI products. It was up in the post-market trading after it reported yesterday. Take a quick look at where we are futures-wise. We are down still on the S&P 500, hoping perhaps for an update to counteract those 4 weeks of declines. And a quick programming note, because of daylight savings time, Bloomberg Brief will be back Monday, March 31st at 5 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. London time.